right, back on the Young Turks. Cenk and Anna with you. SAS tweets in, John, I appreciate what you're saying about nihilism and self-sabotage, but I'm afraid I'm already there and not sure how to find the exit. Okay, that's a little depressing, but all right. G. LaCroix writes in, 1 inch of water over land destroys everything. You don't need 2 feet. And truth be told, tweets in again, not tweets in, but writes in again on YouTube Super Chat. Thank you, Cenk, for answering. I guess if AIPAC can still buy politicians, war with Iran and others, I'm sure, will still be high up on their agenda. Well, that is one way of looking at it, certainly. And one of the stories we did not get to in the first hour was Netanyahu is up on corruption charges. Now, it's a complicated process in Israel. The police have charged him. It's now up to the prosecutors as to whether he will actually get indicted and prosecuted. And the attorney general is a former colleague of Netanyahu, so we'll see. But significant enough corruption charges for Israeli police to charge Netanyahu. All right, what's next, Anna?
All right, we have some updates on the mass shooting that took place at a Florida high school today. The death toll involving the shooting that took place at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Broward County, Florida, is at 17 casualties so far. We know that 17 people have been shot and killed by the 19-year-old gunman. Now, we're uncertain as to whether or not that death toll will rise. However, there are more people getting treatment at the hospital right now. At least 14 more individuals are injured. What we also know is that after an hour of being at large, the suspect is now in custody. We do know that he's a former student at this high school and he was expelled for disciplinary reasons. Apparently, at one point, administrators at the school were concerned about other students' safety, and they were concerned that this student posed a threat, so he wasn't allowed to come onto campus with a backpack. He would brag about his guns on social media. He would share photos of his guns on social media. We know that he had an AR-15 style semi-automatic rifle with several magazines. We're uncertain as to whether or not he had other weapons on him at the time of the shooting. And we will fill you in as we get more details on the shooting. Obviously, this is still developing.
An AR-15, you don't say. Mass shooter and NRA's best friend, an AR-15. You don't need an AR-15 to go hunting. You need an AR-15 if you want to murder people. So 12 people died inside the school building, 2 outside the school building, 1 dead in the street, and 2 died at the hospital.
So what I found interesting about this story was the fact that he was a former student, and based on multiple interviews that I read from current students at the school, everyone would talk about how if ever there was gonna be a mass shooting on campus, it would be from him. He would be the one to carry it out. And one student was quoted as saying, and I'm paraphrasing his quote, everyone predicted that the shooting would happen.
Everyone but the government. The government thought, nah, who cares? Give them a gun. Give everybody a gun. We don't care if people are mentally unstable or if they have a political agenda, or we don't care what any of their motives are. We don't care oftentimes if they were convicted of domestic abuse. There's a lot of things we don't care about. We don't care if they're on the terrorist watch list. We don't care if they want to have bump stocks so they can murder people more efficiently, AR-15s. So many of the mass shooters have used. Armor-piercing bullets, we don't care, we don't care, we don't care. Your kids got shot and killed down in Florida, died in the street, some of them, some inside their schools. You know what the government officials and the politicians and the NRA and the gun manufacturers say? We don't care. We're still making money, so your kids are gonna keep on dying.
This is terrifying. And it's all too common in the US. And to be quite honest with you, when the story first broke, I was uncertain as to whether or not it would make headlines, because shootings happen every single day in the United States. I mean, obviously this shooting led to a higher death toll. It happened on a high school campus. But shootings like this, not like this, but shootings happen every single day in the United States. And we have become so incredibly desensitized to them. But the reality is there are people, myself included, who live in fear. You don't know who's gonna strike next, when they're gonna strike. You don't know who is gonna lose their temper and who might be carrying a gun at the time. I understand that people have a constitutional right to bear arms. I understand that. But every constitutional right has limitations. And while gun owners, responsible gun owners, should have the liberty to have firearms, I believe that all Americans should have the liberty of living in a safe country where they're not fearful that their children are gonna be shot dead at any moment. When are we gonna value that form of liberty? I feel like I feel hopeless when we cover these stories because it doesn't matter what we do, doesn't matter what we say, the outcome is always the same. I thought there might be a little bit of change after the mass shooting that happened in Vegas where 58 people were gunned down. I thought at the very least we would ban the bump stocks, but we couldn't even do that.
And the NRA, in their usual way, lied and said, oh yeah, we'll help you ban bump stocks. And then a couple of days later, when nobody was paying attention, like, of course we were lying. We've got an extra nickel to make from bump stocks. We're all representing gun manufacturers, and they love these shootings. Love them. Gun sales go on up after these shootings because everybody's afraid, just like Anna said. So then they pump more money into our corrupt politicians, and you know how it goes. You want to end gun control, you want to end all the mass shootings and have some degree of sane gun control, get money out of politics. Because when the NRA is allowed to buy politicians, what they spent over, what, 50 or 70 million dollars in the last election cycle, well, then you're never gonna have gun control because we have private financing of elections. Okay, look, I'll give you some quick stats here to give you context. So the US makes up less than 5% of the world's population, but we're number one. We hold 31% of the global mass shooters. And so if you look at graphic 67 here, by the way, coming in at number two, the Philippines, also led by an authoritarian leader who encourages shootings. Hey, look at that, number three, Russia, also an authoritarian leader who is right-wing and encourages violence. And then Yemen, which is in the middle of a disastrous, epic civil war, is number four. It's insane. We dwarf all of these guys. 5% of the world's population, 31% of the mass shooters. All right, deaths from gun violence in 2018, with only 6 weeks in, 1,806 people are dead from just gun violence. Mass shootings, more stats here, 383 mass shootings in 2016. I don't know if you know this, the year only has 365 days, more than one mass shooting per day. In 2017, it dropped a little bit, 346 out of 365 days. And 2018 so far, 30 out of 45 days have had a mass shooting. Deaths from mass shootings in 2017, 14,000 people killed in mass shootings alone last year. That is almost 5 9/11s in 1 year. And for 9/11, we invaded countries, some right countries, some wrong countries, killed arguably millions of innocent civilians in our anger and frustration. But we have 5 9/11s every single year here in America, and we're not allowed to do anything about it because our politicians get bribed by the NRA.
And it's not just the fact that we lack certain regulation that would make all the sense in the world to pass. It's also the fact that we don't enforce regulation that we currently have, or the regulation that we have is so watered down and so incredibly weak that it doesn't function the way that it's supposed to. So I'll give you a very specific example. There was the Texas shooter who shot up a church, and it was a former military member who was dishonorably discharged from the military for bad conduct. The military is supposed to report to the FBI when someone is dishonorably discharged from the military because that individual should not be able to pass a background check if they choose to purchase a gun. Well, it turned out that the military had this insane backlog, years and years of backlog, where they were not reporting to the FBI what they were supposed to report to them. And so after that shooting happened, guess what they did? They rushed to report over 4,000 individuals dating back years ago who were dishonorably discharged and should not be able to pass a background check. So for those of you who are saying, well, we have the background check, I mean, what more could you want? It doesn't work. It doesn't work because it's a watered down, nonsensical version of a regulation that we should really have. And by the way, the FBI is only given 3 days to do that background check, which is not enough time. Not enough time. I mean, well, people can't wait longer than 3 days to purchase their guns. So anyway.
And then if they don't make it in time, they say give them the gun. Whether it was going to turn out that they were violent or criminals or terrorists or mentally deranged, it doesn't matter. Give them the gun. Give them the gun. Give them the gun. Why does it have to be 3 days? Well, that's because the NRA put pressure on politicians. Hurry up! Don't. Whatever you do, I got to make an extra cent from that AR-15 I'm going to sell. And if that AR-15 murders a lot of people, as it often does, and helps in facilitating those murders, well, so what? I already made that dime. Maximize profit at all costs, including your kids' lives.
I'd like to take a break, so let's do that. When we come back, we will discuss the issue of immigration and just how many foreign workers Trump companies hired recently. Come right back.
All right, back on the Young Turks. Only one tweet because we got to go. Eagle Parade says the only thing you got from the Las Vegas shooting was the loss of countless lives and less privacy in hotel rooms.
That's right. That's right.
Usual Band-Aid strategy. Because that was the real problem. Because we had too much privacy in hotel rooms. That was the issue. Not all the guns that were used to kill people. Whether they're in hotel rooms, movie theaters, schools, churches, it doesn't matter. God, oh man, it's so goddamn frustrating. Okay, member shout outs today are Charlie Hall and Deborah Marciano. Okay, either way, Charlie and Deborah, you guys are awesome, thank you. So yesterday in the post game, I showed that I actually invented the phrase fake news back in 2010 because I have the best words. And I'm a very stable genius, which that shirt you can get at shoptyt.com.
I wore the very stable genius shirt on Friday's power panel, and it triggered some Trump fans. It was pretty fun. All it said was Trump's quote.
Yeah.
I mean, why would that trigger you?
Yeah, we didn't say it, he said it.
Did I hurt your feelings?
You actually should be like, oh, haha, look at that. The lip is wearing a shirt. That proves how much of a genius Trump is.
They hate being confronted by how stupid their president is.
Yeah, I was wearing our Covfefe shirt earlier today. Did you get triggered by that? He meant it, and it was a really important secret thing. We still haven't found out what the secret meaning behind Covfefe was. Okay, anyway. So this is technically our 16th anniversary is today.
Yes, and it's a bad day.
Yeah, but luckily the party is tomorrow.
Yes.
So obviously we're sold out. You can't get tickets anymore, but if you're a member, you can actually watch from wherever you are. So if you're a member, please check it out. And if you're not, become a member for the same price that it would cost you for a general admission ticket, just $10. And you could watch it live tomorrow. So Jimmy's gonna do a set, and then we've got a 6-person panel, me, Anna, John, JR, Jimmy, and Ben. And then we're gonna do some political speeches too. I am, Allison Hartson is. We might have more politicians if we do more rallies. Anyway, tytnetwork.com/join to become a member and check that out. All right, what's next, Anna?
Okay. Donald Trump has been very clear about his immigration policy. He wants to end so-called chain migration. He wants to do away with visas that allow low-skilled individuals to come into the country. But his actions obviously do speak louder than words. And if you do a quick analysis of the types of employees his companies tend to hire, you'll notice that the vast majority of them happen to be foreign workers. and they're foreign workers who come to the United States on a temporary basis for low-skilled work. So these are not people who are, typically the type of people that he would be supportive of in his rhetoric. So let me give you the details on this. Now, we're gonna look at 2 Trump properties in Florida and 1 Trump property in New York. The time period is between 2016 and the end of 2017, beginning of 2016, end of 2017. When you look at the number of employees that were hired, you'll find that only one of those employees was a US citizen. Hiring managers said they were able to find and hire only 1 qualified American worker, a cook, for 144 open positions for servers, cooks, housekeepers, and bartenders. Interesting, so the United States doesn't have people who could work as bartenders? No one's qualified to work as a bartender? I find that a little strange.
No, Anna, to be fair though, it's in the remote areas of New York and Florida.
South Florida.
Yeah, can you, have you ever heard of an American bartender in New York?
Never, never. It's a rarity. In August of 2017 alone, for instance, Mar-a-Lago and Palm Beach sought permission to hire 70 servers, housekeepers, and cooks for 8 months starting in October. Also in July of 2017, the Department of Homeland Security raised the cap on H-2B visas for guest workers from 66,000 to 81,000 for fiscal year 2017. Now, July 2017, that's when Trump is president. Trump essentially petitioned to raise the cap for these foreign workers. 3 days later, Trump Properties essentially asked the Department of Homeland Security to allow foreign workers to work for Trump Properties.
No, I'm sure that it was not connected though.
No, not at all.
Okay, so to me, one of the most telling parts of this is the only part of immigration that Trump has increased. So everything else has been decreased. So if you're an H-1B high-skilled worker, the tech guys are screaming that they need more workers there and they don't have enough coders, et cetera. Now, it's not like they can't pay enough money. They pay a lot of money. It's not like the agricultural workers, right? And they're like, we just don't have enough workers. Okay, but Trump says, no high-skilled workers here. I'm not raising the quota on the H-1Bs. The other part of the program is the H-2As. Those are for agricultural workers, farm workers. Now, finding American workers for those are actually difficult, okay? And several different states have tried to kick out undocumented immigrants and then put out notices to try to get American workers and then increase the wages, and they still couldn't get it done, okay? But bartenders, cooks, servers, busboys.
No American was qualified for those jobs. Actually, only 1 American was qualified for one of those jobs. But the other 143 job openings, they had to go to these foreign workers. No American was qualified. I mean, what were they gonna do? What were they gonna do?
Because of his rhetoric, he brings down immigration in every other category. But the one category where he hires workers, somehow that goes up. And 3 days later, he gets a permit to hire almost everyone from outside the country.
This is why when we brought up the issues of conflicts of interest, we made such a big deal about it. Because if you have a president who is a business owner, he's going to use his position as president to push for and pass legislation and policy that benefits him and his bottom line. And that's exactly what happened here. Look, I have nothing against bringing in foreign workers based on these visas, based on these job openings, if it makes sense. But in this case, I mean, listen to his rhetoric and then take a quick look at his actions. I'm pretty sure there were Americans that not only were qualified for those jobs, but would have gladly taken those jobs. So let's take a look at how much was offered in regard to pay. So Mar-a-Lago offered $10.33 per hour for housekeepers, $13.43 for cooks, and $11.88 for servers. No tips, which I don't understand. Why no tips? Anyway, so they offered wages comparable to what Americans are getting paid in other jobs. And so, the argument is always, oh, well, Americans won't take the jobs because they're not making enough money. But again, these are wages that are comparable to other companies that have similar job openings.
So one way that you could have gotten American workers, if it was true, by the way, so by law, they have to follow this procedure to say, well, I tried to get American workers, but I couldn't. And oftentimes, especially for like H-1B workers, that's real. You actually, those are very specialized workers. You put out notices, you can't find anyone, and then you go outside the country. Okay, in this case, they're like, oh, well, we put it in the newspaper for a little while, and golly gee, we didn't like anyone who applied. And by the way, did the government check to see if any of the things that the Trump properties are saying is true? No, nobody checked, okay? And okay, so you can't get a cook for 13 bucks or whatever, why don't you try 15 bucks? What should be the minimum wage? Which, by the way, is the argument that people make, and mainly on the right wing, but some even on the left wing, saying, why don't you just increase wages? I mean, there is a price at which Americans will pick tomatoes. There's certainly a price at which they'll become a bartender. There are bartenders all across the country.
So you made a really interesting point about how there is a price at which Americans are willing to do some of that agriculture work, which, by the way, is backbreaking labor, very difficult to do. But there have been multiple case studies, including in Napa Valley, California, at the vineyards, where the farmers would increase the wages. It would be beyond a living wage. They would also offer health benefits and other benefits to their workers in these job openings, and Americans did not want to take the jobs. Time and time again, they did not want to take the jobs. It's difficult work, it's so hard. And I think that we really overestimate how much of a difference the pay would make in certain fields of work.
But not these fields.
Not
There's
exactly,
cooks all over the country. Okay, so so you don't take our word for it if you're a right winger, and there was very little possibility that you would. So I'm going to quote someone who can't stand immigration, Mark Krikorian, although I'm pretty sure that his family at some point immigrated here. Anyway, executive director for Center for Immigration Studies, he advocates for immigration restrictions. And he really, really likes Trump. But on this H-2Bs, he's confused, and he says that he's, quote, displeased with what Trump has done, and then goes on to say, and I'm going to soften the quote here, but he said it pretty harshly, it's a BS law written to ensure that employers don't have to hire Americans. And that's what Trump is taking and going, yes, I get richer. Well, pretend to be for America first. Look at my hat. My hat says make America great again. You think I'm going to hire Americans? Screw Americans. Of course, I'm going to hire people from what kind of countries? And by the way, most of the countries he hires from, Mexico, Guatemala, Jamaica.
No, this is yes, that's true. But also, employers in Texas hired the most of these foreign workers.
What happened? I thought you were a red state, okay? The only good news out of all this is that given that it's South Florida, he almost certainly hired some Haitians.
Oh my gosh.
Who are now his cooks and his bartenders. I'm not saying anything, I'm just saying. Okay, and look, overall, if you're a Trump fan, you could deny it all you want, but anyway, these are facts. And so you know, he never meant it. And now you know it, He doesn't care about you, he doesn't care about American workers. All he cares about is Donald Trump. How do I make Donald Trump richer if I got a sucker who's gonna vote for me because he thinks I care about the American worker, even though during the campaign, you saw the stories about how he would hire illegal immigrants, undocumented immigrants over and over and over again. And he would cheat and steal and do scam after scam, and the last thing he wanted to do was hire American workers. Why? I don't want to pay him. I don't want to pay him. I want to make more money, yeah. And he's doing it again as president and manipulating the laws. So if you're against immigration, he's playing you for a fool. Oh, get distracted by the wall, but don't look at all the foreign workers I just hired.
Let's talk a little bit about the economy. This is a story that I found super interesting, and I hope you do too. Researchers at Harvard University looked at the issue of social mobility in various countries, and what they wanted to do was gauge the public's perspective on social mobility in their own country and compare it to the reality of social mobility in their country. And what I found so fascinating was the fact that the United States, or at least people in the United States, seem to be much more optimistic about social mobility compared to what the reality reality is. When you look to other countries, specifically European countries, they're much more pessimistic, but their social mobility is actually a lot better than they think it is. So Harvard University compared perceptions of social mobility in countries like America, Britain, France, Italy, and Sweden against actual levels. It finds that Americans tend to be optimistic while Europeans tend to be too pessimistic. So let's get into the numbers. An American born to a household in the bottom 20% of earnings, for instance, only has a 7.8% chance of reaching the top 20% when they grow up. Americans surveyed thought the probability was 11.7%. So there is some disparity there. I would argue, prior to reading the results of this study, I would have thought that the disparity would even be greater.
Because you're like a pessimistic European.
I'm as pessimistic as can be.
I just want to give one piece of context there.
Sure.
Because the European countries, even though they're socialist, do way better than us. In fact, the more socialist they are, the more social mobility that they have. Of course, in America, we're taught it's the opposite. No, if we have unfettered free market and we just crush everybody at the bottom, somehow that'll toughen them up and they'll get to the top. No, it doesn't toughen them up. It puts them in a hole they can't get out of. So in Sweden, which is far, far more socialist than us, they have much greater social mobility. In about 12%, 11.5%, 12% of the bottom 20% move on up to the top 20% in Sweden. Although in Sweden and in other European countries, they think, no, it's probably less, right? They think it's less than 10%. They actually do better than they realize. And in America, we think, oh, we got this thing figured out, man. We're all moving to the top.
No.
In fact, almost none of us are.
No, but this is for me, I think that the results of this study are applicable to election results. That's the reason why I found this so fascinating, because what always befuddles me is when poor people vote against their best interests, vote for policies and politicians who represent policies that would be disastrous for them and their economic situation. And I think it's because they have been conditioned to think that the American dream is alive and well, and the only thing that's destroying the American dream are these socialist programs, right? And if we just vote for the person who's against these government programs that help the poor and redistribution of wealth, well then our economic situation will be far greater. But if you look at the numbers, if you look at the states that typically lean toward Republican candidates or are just straight out red states, they're often the states that require the most aid in the form of government programs, right? Whether it's welfare, food stamps, whatever it is. And so there's a disconnect there, and it's all about perception. It's all about the way that they perceive what their future could be, even though if you juxtapose that to reality, it's a far different picture. So
what we're actually really good at here in America is marketing. And so we market the American dream, and I believe it. I believe in it, and I think it's possible. And a lot of people who work here, their parents were dirt poor, or they themselves were really poor, and we rose up, and it's possible, et cetera, et cetera. But that doesn't mean we should make it harder. It means that maybe one of the ways that we got up, for example, the only reason my family got anywhere is because my dad was allowed to get a free college education. Otherwise, we'd still be olive farmers in southeastern Turkey. So that doesn't mean you crush people underneath you. It means you give them a hand up because they actually can rise if you believe in them. But America, unfortunately, doesn't. All we do is marketing gimmicks. So what percentage of people that are in the bottom 20% make it out of the bottom 20% at all, make it to the 21st percentile, not to the top, but just out of the bottom 20, only 32%.
That's so sad.
And again, among these 5 countries that were tested, we're rock bottom. We're the worst. We're not number 1. We're last. Britain, which has socialized medicine, and the list goes on of how much more their government gets involved, is number 1 at 38%. So it's just not true that just taking away any government help for people makes it more likely that they'll rise up. It makes it less likely. So I love this story. I find it so fascinating, and there's more that I want to share. So let's also talk about
how people are likely to react to this very information, okay? When given pessimistic information about social mobility, left-wing respondents became even more likely to support economic redistribution. However, right-wing respondents' support for redistribution did not change. So if you happen to lean toward the right and you are watching this right now, you have already disregarded the information that we have shared with you. You're sticking to your guns, you're not changing your mind based on their findings. Also, nearly half of the states in the United States, and this is not based on the, come back to me. What I'm about to share with you is not based on the Harvard study. This is actually a result from Pew Research. They do their own annual survey to see what the well-being of Americans is like. And here's what they found. Nearly half of the states in the US saw their scores decline, and 0 states saw a significant improvement in well-being from 2016 to 2017. So for instance, people reported more worry, little interest in doing things, depression symptoms, and perceiving less positive energy from family and friends. Less people reported having a leader in their lives who makes them enthusiastic about the future. There was also a decline in people who said they are reaching their goals and happy with their standard of living. Social mobility is so incredibly important. We have a country full of people who are feeling this deep sense of despair because they're working longer hours, they're doing jobs that they absolutely hate, because they have to put food on the table for their families, and they feel unappreciated. And we need to do something to change the way our system is set up, because people are miserable and they will continue to be miserable if we don't change.
I believe in the American dream. I just believe that we should make it more likely, not less likely. We should help people achieve the American dream rather than crushing their dreams. Not too much to ask for.
Yes.
Okay, what's next?
All right. A police officer in West Virginia who lost his job for refusing to shoot a suspect has settled with the police department to the tune of $175,000. Stephen Mater is the name of the cop who got fired. And the case all began when he was called to a home where a domestic dispute had occurred. He was immediately confronted by the suspect, who was holding a gun. Now it was an unloaded gun, and Stephen Mater, the cop in the story, realized that this guy didn't really pose a threat, because as soon as he was confronted by him, the suspect asked him to shoot him. And what Mater wanted to do was de-escalate the situation. He didn't want to shoot him. He told him, "I'm not going to shoot. Please drop the gun. Let's figure this out." And then 2 other police officers showed up to the scene and immediately shot and killed the suspect. Now, the police department decided that Mater had put the other cops' lives in danger by not shooting the suspect, and they fired him. Mater sued for wrongful firing and wrongful termination. There we go. And luckily, he did win a settlement of $175,000.
Okay, so understand that the cops do an investigation and they go, "Oh, Mater was right. The gun was not loaded. He was trying to do suicide by cop. So you're fired anyway." So you showed proper restraint. It's not that there are a few bad apples and then once the bad apples are realized, they throw them out and they fix the bunch, right? No, there's actually a few good apples like Mater, and once they're discovered, they're immediately crushed and thrown away, okay? Now, why? Because that embarrasses the rest of the cops. We went and killed that guy we didn't need to kill, and it turns out you showed, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that we didn't need to kill him. So we got to get rid of you, because it's embarrassing. You're embarrassing the rest of us who are cowards and don't want to take any chances, and we shoot, kill, because that's in the training. Look, when I say that it's not just a few bad apples, it's not to say all cops are bad people. That's ridiculous, right? But it is to say that the training is wrong. They train them to be bad apples. So when they get a good apple, they said, one of the reasons they fired him, they're like, "You didn't follow protocol." They said he had apparent difficulties in critical incident reasoning.
I couldn't disagree with that more. He understood the importance of de-escalating the situation rather than shooting before asking any questions. The other cops arrived to the scene and immediately shot the suspect dead. And I commend Mater for his bravery. I commend him for understanding the responsibility that he had as a police officer. And Cenk, I agree with you, there's an issue with the training, but more importantly, even after the training, there's a problem with the culture. Because the culture, at least at this specific police department in West Virginia, is no, you absolutely have to shoot as soon as you think that this person might pose even a small risk. And if you don't, you will be punished. You will lose your job. That sends a very strong message to all cops. I don't think all cops, enter the force as bad people, as corrupt people, as individuals who want to cause harm to people. I think they genuinely start wanting to do good. But I think that they get tainted by the current culture that we're seeing in various departments.
We teach them to be bad guys, and we encourage it. Look, if you shoot the wrong guy, you don't get fired. You kill the wrong person, you don't get fired. You don't kill the person, and you're right, you get fired. I mean, it's crazy. And you think, like, I know some right wingers are like, that Mater is soft, man. What if the gun wasn't loaded? Mater is a Marine veteran who served in Afghanistan, and since he served in really hostile situations, he said he had a sense of what is actually dangerous and what is not dangerous, and who's going to act and who's not going to act, and he wanted to protect a fellow citizen in West Virginia. He was looking out for you. He wanted to make sure, look, how many people in West Virginia have guns? A lot, right? He caught this guy on a bad day.
Yeah.
And he wanted to make sure that the guy didn't die on a bad day. And he's a veteran who's been through it before, and he wanted to make sure that he protected that guy's life. And they're like, well, you must be punished for doing the right thing because you're embarrassing the rest of us who are taught and rewarded to do the wrong thing.
He is exactly the type of person who is well suited to protect and serve. And even though I'm happy he received this settlement, right now he's employed as a truck driver. And that is such a gross injustice.
Yeah, whereas the guys who shot the guy unnecessarily are still cops in West Virginia. And one last thing, of course, afterwards, it wasn't just enough to fire him, they had to smear him.
Yeah.
So one of the things they said was, he put a parking ticket in the wrong part of the car once. Come on. And one time he cursed while confronting a suspect.
Because that never happens with
No, you'd have to fire every cop. I mean, why don't you just say we're corrupt and we'd like to announce how corrupt we are by pretending that we care about cops cursing? Okay, it was a gross act of injustice. We got a little bit of justice today with the settlement, but he should be welcomed in any police force in the country. That's the kind of guy you can get behind. All right, Rebel Headquarters is next. Bye-bye.